Okay, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Heather Hull. I'm a program specialist with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, and I will be assisting with the Zoom platform today. Many of you may already be familiar with the Zoom platform, but I would like to provide a brief overview of the features we will be using during the training session. From your menu bar, we recommend you open the participant list and the chat box. Your participant list includes nonverbal feedback buttons, including raise hands and a couple others. If you have a question during the presentation, you can raise your hand or you can feel free to put it in the chat box. We will be using the chat box a lot to provide links and additional information throughout the session, as well as using it to ask questions and hopefully answer questions during the presentation. Should you have any questions or require any assistance with the features, please feel free to send a message to the host via the chat box. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Mark Funkhauser to begin the presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather. I'd like to welcome everyone today. My name is Mark Funkhauser. I'm a site manager with the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. I'm helping to facilitate today's presentation with my colleague, Andrew Wachter. Andrew, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Wachter. I am also a site manager working alongside Mark at the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. Excited to have everybody join us today to talk about opioids in state courts and have some conversations around difficult topics in interventions and treatment options.
Thank you. As Andrew said, this is a series of webinars. We are partnering with the State Justice Institute, hosting 5 webinars. We did one on prevention previously. Future webinars will include conversations on harm reduction, reducing overdose and death, and recovery. This webinar is the second of the series, and we will be exploring challenges associated with intervention and treatment in dependency and delinquency cases. We would also like to thank our primary funder and partner on this project, the State Justice Institute. SJI has a long history and mission of providing support to improve the quality of justice in state courts, along with fostering innovative, efficient solutions to common issues faced by all courts. We can move this slide, Andrew. We'd like to talk about our learning objectives today. First of all, we're going to be trying to understand the role of courts in the development of a continuum of effective services and resources. We're also going to try to understand the value and need of those intervention services for juvenile and family courts. And lastly, application of principles of intervention to juvenile and family court cases. Would like to also remind us that we will be having Andrew and I will be facilitating the webinar today, and we will have expert faculty. We'll introduce them shortly, and then we also would like to encourage online participation. We're talking about intervention and treatment in the context of both dependency and delinquency. We'll be highlighting examples that are specific to opioids and broader issues and concerns. We will explore challenges associated with referring children and families to services in dependency and also in delinquency cases, and how courts and other agencies and service providers can work together to meet the needs and improve the lives of children and families. The value of intervention in the community cannot be overstated, especially as it relates to the challenge courts face when there is not a significant collaborative network with available alternatives for treatment and intervention to support people from unnecessary deeper involvement in the system, including removal of children, detention for juveniles, and placement in residential services for young people and adults as well. We also must mention the integral connection between intervention and the rest of the continuum. Courts, judges, and communities need resources and support as they do not operate in a vacuum. They cannot do it alone. This comes through a serious focus on trust and community relationship building. Getting creative in the development, implementation, and sustainability of services, programs, and resources is very essential. And today, that leads us to the introduction of our presenters today from Adams County, Colorado, and I'd like to allow them to unmute and introduce themselves, starting with Judge Catherine Delgado.
Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here today. I'm I'm looking forward to answering your questions and telling you about the programs that we have in our juvenile court in Adams County, Colorado. I've been on the bench for about 18.5 years, and almost half of that has been as a juvenile judge. It is my passion, it is what I love to do, but I also know that it is the hardest docket that a judge can handle. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Gregg, and I am an assistant county attorney in Adams County. I have been with Adams County now 15 years. When I graduated from law school, I clerked for a district court judge in Jefferson County for a year, and then I got my position at the Adams County Attorney's Office. And I was immediately assigned to dependency and neglect cases. And then we also represent the department in juvenile delinquency cases. So, and that has remained my practice. I've been fortunate since 2013, I've been assigned to our family treatment court as the county attorney, and then also in 2017 to our ICWA court. So I am a huge proponent of specialty courts. I think they work, and I'm fortunate to work in Adams County, where ever since I began, we have been a model court, and collaboration is the way we do things. And so I'm excited to share with you some of our experience. Thank you.
And my name is Wendy Lewis, and I'm a respondent parent counsel. For those of you who don't know what that is, that means I represent indigent parents in jeopardy of losing custody or their rights to their children due to social services and court involvement. I began my career as a trial attorney 23 years ago as a public defender for the state of Colorado. I then moved to a civil law firm and realized that my true passion and calling was indigent defense. So I was able to get a contract for the state, or with the state of Colorado, to be a respondent parent counsel. I have been a respondent parent counsel now for 12 years. I also lecture at the University of Colorado Law School. I teach trial advocacy there. I lecture at the University of Denver's Social Work School. They bring me in to cross-examine social workers, social work master's students, to prepare them for court. I write appeals, and I've also published or been published in a number of articles and a book regarding that are used for references. The Grid here in Colorado, I wrote a chapter there, and I've been published actually as far away as Maine. So hello, if there are any Mainers out there, in child protection. My passion is indigent defense, but my calling is respondent parent counsel, and representing people who a lot of other people have decided aren't very important and shouldn't be given all that much attention. I disagree with that. I think my clients deserve a chance, and I work very hard for them. And I'm really excited and passionate about the topics we're talking about, and I'm excited to be able to present with Judge Delgado and Catherine Gregg. Judge Delgado is my judge, and I go against, although we also collaborate with Catherine.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I'd like to turn it over to my colleague Andrew now to talk about the setting the stage and the beginning of this project. Andrew?
Thanks, Mark. Just briefly before we start, I see there's a hand raised. Lauren, it looks like you've raised your hand. If you wouldn't mind typing your question in the chat, and one of our faculty can help address your question, perhaps. So I want to talk a little bit. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for the introductions from our panelists. Excited to have Adams County with us this afternoon. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to this place and how we developed this series of 5 webinars. We received funding at NCJFCJ from the State Justice Institute. As Mark indicated, they are our partner in this work. They were specifically interested in having us work with court jurisdictions across the country in ways to address the way opioids and other substance use disorders appear in courts and how the courts can respond. NCJFCJ developed some targeted resource mapping tools and engaged jurisdictions in this work. And really what it is that an effort to document the services and resources that exist in communities to address the needs of children and family who come before the courts, particularly as a result of parental substance abuse in child dependency matters, but also delinquency matters as well. Many of these service providers serve both children and adults. So over the last year, we've engaged 10 or 12 jurisdictions in this work where they put together a small team of 5 to 6 people led by a judge to sit down and really put pencil to paper on what's available in their community. We work with them to then create a resource directory, which really has lots of useful information about each of those services, what their target population is, what their contact information is, form of payment that they accept, a really useful tool for courts and other stakeholders to have at their disposal when they're making referrals to service providers in the community for children and family. And so we've done that over the past year, and over that time, as a team, Mark and myself and the rest of us at NCJFCJ started putting our heads together around what we experienced through that work, what it was like for us as the technical assistance providers with these jurisdictions, and what some of our takeaways were. And we came up with this series of webinars entitled Difficult Conversations, because we found that there were indeed a lot of difficult conversations that happen between the judiciary and the treatment provider world on when they're addressing the unique needs of children and families. And so that's how we got started. Like Mark said, we had one in December, and this is our second one. So today we're really focusing on intervention and treatment. And so I thought we'd get started talking a little bit about what we mean when we're talking about intervention in this case. So intervention strategies aim to treat and support individuals in various ways and can be implemented in a lot of different settings, in the community, in schools, in hospital settings. They exist in lots of different areas in the community. And of course, it goes without saying that a robust, effective continuum of services that includes intervention is critical to avoid more restrictive outcomes in juvenile justice and dependency. So we're talking about things like the more treatment and intervention resources available in the community, the less likely we have to remove children in dependency cases or place youth in delinquency matters. And so for our first question that we're going to pose to our panelists today is, what role is does the court play in addressing barriers to treatment in the community? And before I toss it to Judge Delgado, I just wanted to plug that NCJFCJ has held a position for years that judges play a critical role in assuring that there are enough services in the community to address the needs of children and family. And so, Judge, if you would, talk a little bit about what you see as your role in the court to address those barriers to treatment.
I'd be happy to. I want to start off by saying that when I rotated into a juvenile division in 2004, I had never handled juvenile cases. I was a prosecutor handling domestic violence and sexual assault cases before I was appointed to the bench. So when I rotated in 2006, I knew nothing about juvenile law. And our court was designated as a model court with the National Council of Family and Juvenile Court Judges. And quite honestly, that has made a tremendous difference in my professional life. NCJFCJ gave me the foundation to become a leader in Adams County in the 17th Judicial District where I serve. It is there where I met judges from across the country who were also lead judges who told me it was okay to step off the bench, to take off the rope and be a leader in the community, to teach the community how important it was to collaborate with the court. It was there where I learned that I wasn't the smartest person as part of the team. It took a group of stakeholders to come together, work together, respect one another, trust each other, and develop relationships. And it is through that work that Adams County has really been able to be a leader in the state of Colorado. I'm extremely proud of the work that our team has done since 2006. As part of the Model Court program, Colorado developed our own program called Best Practice Courts. Every judicial district in Colorado designates a lead judge to be a leader in their community, to develop strategies, to bring the right people together, to convene meetings, to make a difference, to address the gaps in the system. And that is what we have been able to do. And especially, I think, over this past year, I'm sure the judges who are participating in this webinar know how difficult this year has been for all of us. You know, having to conduct our hearings on Zoom or on WebEx, parents not being able to see their children, treatment providers not being able to keep their doors open. It has been a very difficult year for all of us. But the reality in my district, and I'm so proud of our team, is that we have continued to address these barriers by having these respectful relationships where we meet on a frequent basis and we figure out what we need. We come up with solutions. And we look at other jurisdictions. I'm not going to say that the 17th is the best in the state, although I do think it is, but I'm sure some of my colleagues in other judicial districts would beg to differ. But it is very often that I reach out to some of my colleagues in the Denver Juvenile Court and the Jefferson County Court and say, what are you doing to address this issue? We need to work together and learn from one another. So I think the role of the court is extremely important. As judges, we are leaders in our community, in the courtroom and off the bench. It is our responsibility to bring our stakeholders together and to work together to resolve these issues. That is the only way we're going to be able to provide services to our families, to reunite families, to make them safe and stable, because as we all know, despite the horrific situations of families that we read in reports that we get, kids want to be back with their parents, and we deserve to give the parents every opportunity to mitigate the concerns in their cases, provide them with the treatment that they need so that they can be reunited in a safe and stable way. And I would defer to Catherine and to Wendy. You know, one of the great programs that we have in our court is our integrated family treatment court. You know, Wendy and Catherine are both stakeholders in that court. Catherine is also the lead county attorney in the Indian Child Welfare Act court, which is a court I also preside over. So we take a lot of pride in the innovation that we have been able to establish in our court. And largely it is because of the relationship that we have been able to build with our numerous stakeholders, including treatment providers. So I defer to Wendy or to Catherine and see if they want to add anything.
Well, Judge, I would just say that as the representative of the department, I'm fortunate that the department is very invested in being collaborative, that they are always willing to meet with the court to make sure that the court is informed about what services we have available. And then it's also helpful to have those regular meetings. We have best practice court meetings where there are stakeholders from the various providers that are able to indicate what is needed, because the court, I think, is in the unique position to be able to see these parents and these families and see the professionals and really see what is missing, and can let the department know. I can indicate, like in our ICWA court, there was some missing cultural providers, and Judge Delgado has brought them in, and the department has contracts so that we're able to make sure that we're providing the appropriate services. Similarly, in our family treatment court, we have seen we've had needs that have not been met, and so services that are necessary for families, and the court is able to indicate to the department a service that is apparent, and we've been able to reach out, and then the department is able to try and fill that need. So I think that collaboration is just absolutely essential in juvenile court. You know, courtrooms are by their nature adversarial, but juvenile is unique in that is the last place we want to go. We want to try and collaborate. Obviously, when we have to be adversarial, we will be, But for the sake of families, we do everything we can to collaborate, because ultimately we do all have the same goal of reunification and successfully closing a case.
And I'll just piggyback off of what Judge Delgado and Catherine said. You know, one thing that I think is very important that was said is judges taking off the robe, building those relationships. And I think that's very, very important. My clients suffer from trauma that, even for someone who's been doing this for this long, is sometimes overwhelming. And when I hear from a client they're only able to get mental health services or substance abuse counseling once a month, I'm able to go to the judge, I'm able to go to the county and say, this isn't working. And the judge is able to make the phone calls, have the department brought in, supervisors and all, the mental health providers, the substance use providers, and try to get better services for our clients. Life skills. People who I represent often can't budget well. They lose their housing. How can we help that? Let's bring in a life skills worker, someone to work with the team, and then talk to that life skills worker. What else would help? Let's look at mental health therapists and substance use therapists being part of our meetings. Let's bring in the companies that provide this service that the department pays for to provide these services to my clients and to our clients and the kids, and make sure that we're all communicating. As Mark said, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. We've got, the communication is key. And when we build those relationships, not only as a team in court, but with our providers, I think that's when the real work gets done. And I do think for judges being the leaders, when a judge asks a mental health provider why they're only providing once a month services to someone with the kind of trauma that our clients have, I think that the attendance or the schedule opens up a bit. And I do think that's really important for the judge to take the lead and make sure people in the community are really buying into providing services for these people, and understanding that the goal is for kids to be raised by their parents. And we can do that if those parents can be safe and appropriate, and we have to be a community to work together to do that.
Thank you. One of the messages I heard in all three of the feedback from all three of you was this notion of building relationships. And I would echo that when we engage these courts in the resource mapping work, inevitably people got together for these meetings that typically didn't get together, and they would learn from each other about what services existed, and building relationships ended up being an unintended sort of benefit of this work, which was great to see. So thank you. We're going to turn to the audience and our participants today and ask you to open up your chat box and help us here and describe some strategies that you might be using to address barriers and identify gaps for treatment in the community. So the chat box is open. Feel free to type in there. We have some staff that will be reading those as they come in. Mark and Adria both will be keeping an eye on the chat to see what you guys are sharing. We're interested in hearing about ways that you address gaps and barriers to treatment in your own community, strategies you might be using. Any unique ways that your court or the service providers might be getting together to share information. Maybe you're doing some of this resource mapping that I was talking about earlier in the presentation.
And while everyone is writing their questions, I did want to respond to one of the things Wendy said. We have certainly had issues with treatment providers not providing the services that are necessary. And I have had to call the treatment providers and talk to the top officials and say, this is this is not what you agreed to do in your contract with the department, and we need to meet with you and we need to figure out what the problem is. And every time I've had to do that, the problem has been resolved very quickly. And it is because of the relationship that I have been able to establish with the leaders within the treatment organization. So when I say bringing the right stakeholders together, it's important that you be very specific as who's at the table and make sure that you're talking to people that have the ability to make the changes that need to be made.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Christian Garcia says, as a substance abuse evaluator, I make it a point to meet with local providers to assist in treatment matching for clients and at times for parents. So that matching is very important to get people into the right programs that fit their needs. Kimberly Grimes says, we keep in constant contact with our providers. We have monthly stakeholder meetings and a quarterly executive level stakeholder meeting, meeting weekly with the family court, judges, attorneys, and treatment providers. So that oversight is very critical, regular monitoring and support, and also accountability. Peggy Van Sickles says, we use a mobile alcohol and drug testing services so people can actually work. Aaron Morgan, and finally, this will be the last one. It says, I work in a specialized court as a mental health clinician, works directly with treatment providers and participates in meetings for each of the clients and evaluate the needs of the family. So I think that that should do it probably. Andrew, if we want to move on to the next question.
Yeah, thanks everyone for those ideas in the chat and sharing those with the rest of our participants. I'll turn the next question and topic over to Mark.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to be talking about evidence-based intervention and treatment, but first we, as was mentioned in the chat, actually, the screening and assessment are necessary to identify appropriate treatment interventions. If children and families aren't assessed and screened well, they don't get to where they need to be. They could be mismatched in programs that don't fit their needs. And it's extremely important that happens so they can actually get what they need instead of just getting put in a program that might not fit their needs. One of the more challenging discussions that we're going to talk about today probably is the medication-assisted treatment, or MAT. This would be the use of medications combined with counseling and behavioral therapies to provide a whole patient approach to treatment of SUDs, and that's according to SAMHSA. So we're going to open it up to Judge Delgado and talking about, maybe ways that that your court addresses buy-in from court and stakeholders regarding MAT, maybe some challenges or successes you've had with regard to accessing MAT for the participants in the community or in jails, funding and staffing and things like that. Judge, could you speak to this, please?
I'm gonna start first with Wendy because she works directly with her clients who are thinking about medically assisted treatment. Wendy.
Very good.
Thanks, Judge. My clients often, I think there is some pushback from MAT, which I call MAT, and I think there is pushback because there's this idea from people who use, but also family, friends, that you're just substituting one opioid for the other. You're just substituting one addiction for the other. And I really think that is a very overly simplified view of substance use issues or substance use disorders. And it's quite unrealistic, actually, I think, also about substance use disorders. But I also think it's a complete misunderstanding of what MAT is. MAT is not the substitution of one substance for another. You don't give an alcoholic who drinks vodka and say, okay, here's some whiskey. That's not what it is. What it is taking a person from doing a drug that will kill them, has probably destroyed much of who they are, much of how they see themselves, much of who they believe themselves to be, and is on the way to destroying their life. And you replace it with a medication that allows you to function, to get a job, to parent, to calm down, to be more normal as we think about it. Evidence shows medically assisted treatment is evidence-based, and it shows that when it is done appropriately in a safe and controlled way, it is effective, incredibly effective, and our outcomes are much better when it's used safe and in controlled and under professional supervision. You don't normally see bad side effects. You also don't get drug-seeking behaviors, and you don't get the problematic use. So medically assisted treatment for my clients is life-changing and life-saving. For my clients, it helps with the stigma of having a substance use disorder. We're moving away from the word addiction and moving to substance use disorder because we're recognizing, and I think most people do recognize, and thank you, I'm glad there's providers out there, that substance use is it's a disease. It is like cancer. And just like cancer or diabetes, you would not tell someone to not use medication. In fact, you would look at them funny if they said, I'm not going to use medication. But medically assisted treatment isn't just medication. It's that holistic approach that Mark and Andrew were talking about, where you're providing people with wraparound services. I think medically assisted treatment for my clients, knowing that there's a medication out there that can assist them, it helps reduce the stigma of having a substance use disorder. It allows for them to understand that this is something that probably they were born with and has become out of their control, but they can get in their control. It decreases the risk of relapse. You do not get the same high. In fact, with most medically assisted treatment, you don't get high. It helps prevent all of the issues that are involved with drug use, not just the entering of this drug subculture of your community, but also intravenous use, AIDS, hepatitis, all of the things we think about when we think about drug use and the risks our clients take every day when they use drugs. It helps prevent overdose, and it helps prevent relapse. And it's for my clients to be able to have access to medically assisted treatment, as I stated, is absolutely life-saving. For a lot of people, I think they feel like, and I think family, we all know substance abuse is not just an individual family community problem, right? It's huge, it's everybody's problem. And when we think about people thinking about my clients, why can't they just stop? Why are they choosing drugs over their kids? Why they're not going to get up and get a job? They're going out and looking for drugs. It's a very judgmental way of looking at substance use disorders, and it ignores that this drug, you know, whether it's opioids or alcohol, whatever it is, has effectively impacted them physically, emotionally, their work, their social life, their health, their job, their relationships. And the people who we see in our courts, these are, frankly, the most vulnerable and least able to cope of our society. Because if they could do it on their own, they would not have a case with in the courts. And so medically assisted treatment, I think, really allows people to understand that it's just say no when your whole life has been ruined by what you're doing and you can't stop, is not super effective for people with significant substance use disorders. And having a doctor that they can go to, who they can talk to talk about, or to get over the hump of trying to get sober and then get their cravings reduced, get what they need in order for their brains to not continually seek out that pleasure feeling that they get from the drugs, is, I think, as I've stated, it's just life-changing. And I think also what is really important and sometimes hard for my clients to understand is that wraparound service that you need. You know, we don't just give somebody, just as with other diseases, we don't just give somebody medication and send them on their way, right? We have to treat the underlying cause of the issue, right? The trauma, the mental health, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse, all of the trauma that my clients have suffered. We need to look at that because that's probably what exacerbated or caused them to look at drug use, right? My clients often, or people will say, Wendy, how can you represent these people? You know, and I say, look, my clients aren't choosing, for the most part, between college and heroin addiction. That's not what's happening. That's not their life. They're choosing how to survive, how to escape the memories, how to escape that trauma. And so what we do, and I think we do it really well in Adams County, is we work on the underlying trauma to allow that person to talk about what leads them into the drug use, which I think really ends up in, frankly, great success. So I am a huge proponent of medically assisted treatment and the wraparound services that go with it. I wouldn't ever say we should just give them a shot or a pill and let's call it good. But I think we've come a long way in Adams County. It's recommended by our courts. It's accepted by our courts. And it is not. It really is not the idea that you're somehow under the influence. Some of my clients have an issue with that. Well, am I sober if I'm using medically assisted treatment? And the answer is yes, you are. It is done just as a medication in a safe, controlled environment, and it is incredibly effective to help people regain control of their lives.
Thank you, Wendy. So Judge Delgado or Catherine, do you have anything to expand on with regard to the challenges that exist or arise for people with medication-assisted treatment? Anything you'd want to add?
Well, I would just indicate, I think Wendy summed it up really well, but I think the idea of the stigma and the replacing one addiction with another used to be our mantra. I mean, we used to not allow people in our family treatment court, which is our drug court, who were on methadone to be in our program because we thought it was just trading one addiction for another. And clearly we were completely wrong. And we changed that entire approach mostly because we listened to medical professionals who explained to us that what the treatment does is it just allows people to feel normal. It doesn't give them a high, it just allows them to feel normal so they can address the underlying causes of their substance use. And so once the medical professionals explained that to us, it was like a light bulb went off for all of us. We're like, well, of course, if you feel sick, you're not going to be able to address this issue because you just can't. So, you know, we have more providers certainly that provide it now than we used to have. Our local treatment center provides it, as well as there's several others. So that's something that has accelerated in the last few years of it being more accessible. And we've really seen success with it. We've seen people be able to really address their substance abuse disorder because they've had this assist and they can use that to then address the underlying causes.
Thank you, Catherine. Andrew, let's move to the audience question. And we do have a question in the chat I might refer to Judge Delgado. It says, how extensive is the availability of residential programs that take the mom and the baby in Adams County? So this is often a challenge in communities. So do you have any issues with that in Adams County?
Well, I would assume, like in most communities, there's a wait list, and we have wait lists for our moms and our babies. And unfortunately, that wait list can be months before we're able to get a parent, a mom and her baby into a residential treatment center. But you know, many of those cases are in the family treatment court. They're the high risk and high need cases. And by having the court motivate the parent to participate in their treatment, I think keeps them focused on moving forward and not giving up, even though it could be a month or two before they're in a residential treatment center. And I wanted to piggyback on some of the things that Wendy said, because I think a lot of times I see a parent, whether it's a mother or a father, and they're using medically assisted treatment, that they think that's going to be it, that they don't have to do the other pieces of a treatment plan to address the underlying reasons as why they do have a substance abuse disorder. And I think that is where the court plays a huge role in trying to engage with the parent and trying to get them to understand that there's some trauma that they need to deal with, and that it's going to be hard to deal with that. But they have a team, they have a lawyer who really understands their needs. And, you know, I'm so grateful to have lawyers like Wendy Lewis, who is an incredible advocate for her client. She understands the issues, and I think that is just critically important for everybody who's in this webinar, is that to ensure that you know that you're educated on these issues, that the lawyers who represent the parents, the guardian ad litems who are representing the best interests of the children, that everybody understands what is the truth, and not have this old view of what medically assisted treatment is. I mean, we have come light years away from when I first started as a juvenile judge in 2006, really understanding that it's not addiction, that it is a substance abuse disorder, that it is a medical issue that can be treated. That's one component, but there's a lot of other pieces to that puzzle. And I wish I had more availability for residential treatment for mothers and for their babies, but also for fathers. We cannot forget about fathers.
Thank you, Judge. So audience members, if you'd like to put in the chat any barriers or to access for MAT in your community or in the jails, please do so. We'll monitor that. While we're doing that, I'd like to kind of wrap up this particular question. What I heard was reducing stigma and using evidence-based practices like harm reduction in MAT, educating the community, and actually helps allow people to become socially acceptable, responsible, and productive members of society. That it's not necessarily a panacea in and of itself, but combined with other community supports and follow-up and support and accountability, it can be a very valuable tool. And it also addresses, if we address the underlying cause instead of just the symptoms. So not seeing anything in the chat right now. So we can continue to monitor that. Andrew, if you want to move on to the third question.
Sure, thanks, Mark. So I wanted to move on to our last question for our panelists and sort of discuss the how intervention works in child welfare and juvenile justice, and to the extent that how we keep families together in these cases where obviously intervention is necessary. Obviously, we know that the goal in dependency cases is to keep families together whenever possible, because we know most children will in fact return to those families if they are removed. Similarly, in delinquency matters, we know that the goal is to keep the youth in the community and home. Those connections to their community and schools and churches are very important while they're engaged in treatment. So I wanted to engage the panelists, Judge, and the rest of the team. How do you balance keeping families together while addressing treatment needs for substance use issues?
I want to start with Catherine.
Thank you, Judge. So this is a question that when I look back at how things were done when I first started in Adams County, we removed a lot more. We filed more cases. Now the department's approach is to really file cases as a last resort, because we want to try and engage the family without having to go to the courts and to try and be as collaborative as possible. But obviously we do need to then take it to the courts if that's necessary. But we also try and we use the court cases to try and still keep the families together. And really removal is completely the last resort. And so part of the ways we do that is a lot of safety planning. In Adams County, we use a lot of family team meetings where we have parents bring their supports, whether it be family members or community supports, to those meetings to really address how we can keep children in the home not have to go to that removal, or if we do need to do a removal, at least it be to a kin. We also have a lot of in-home services that we use to try and keep children in the home. I'm sure all of you are aware of the Families First Prevention Act that is going to be going into effect, which I think will be groundbreaking for the entire country as far as really providing services to families, because we know that is what works and that is what is best. The greatest trauma we can do to children is to have to remove them from their home. So we need to do everything we can to prevent that. Obviously, there are safety issues and sometimes that is necessary, but if there is anything we can do less than that, we are going to do that. So I've certainly in Adams County, we have so many in-home providers now that assist in keeping families together. We also, in our family treatment court, in particular, and in other cases, but particularly in family treatment court, I think we're always considering that that there could be relapses. And certainly we've had plenty of parents have relapses because we expect that, and really work as a team to try and figure out, is there a safety plan we can do? Are there services we can put into place? What can we get family members involved in? We've also tried to really have family members understand our court process. We've certainly made strides to try and have family members come to court, and we've even had some individual meetings with families and the court to help explain what we do. We really, I think it's just important to be open to any ideas that will allow for that collaboration. So, you know, I think, you know, we really need to balance the need to keep children in their home whenever possible. And that is, you know, once we've removed, we also know it's a lot harder to reunify. So we need to really try and upfront try and keep the children in the home whenever possible. And then obviously if we have to remove them, we try every service we can to reunify.
Thank you. Anybody else, Judge or Wendy?
I would say that I think the majority of our cases, and I know the department is very proud of this statistic, that most of our kids that have open court cases are with kin. And we have an expanded definition of kin in Colorado, which doesn't necessarily always mean a blood relative, but a family friend, and really trying to keep children with people that they know as opposed to foster care is really important. And I think it's my obligation as the judge who's presiding over a case to invite the family to be present at the court hearing, to log in on WebEx and observe what is happening, have a voice and tell me how things are going. I want the system to be transparent, and I want the families to understand, you know, how important their role is. At every hearing where a family member who has custody and is caring for a child, I always thank them for what they're doing, not only for the children, but for their sister, their daughter, their son, and just really let them know how grateful the system is for what they're doing. And I think that really helps build trust in the system. A lot of times, the parents in our cases, you know, they've created a lot of trouble in the family's lives, and their families don't trust them. And trying to educate the family on the fact that this is a disease, that the person that they used to know wants to be that person that they used to be, and that this is not the way they want to live their life. And what we're going to do as a court to treat the issues and make them safe and stable and reunite their family. I just think transparency is so important. And I'm just really grateful that we have so many family members that are there for the kids.
Thank you.
And I agree. I think there's a real, and I like how the word balance is in this question, because I think it's I think it's obvious that we work incredibly hard to know our cases very, very well. And I think we have to look at, as a lawyer for parents, trying to keep children with parents, you know, I need to look at, and hopefully the county and the caseworker, guardian ad litem, and court, we're all looking at what is the drug of choice? How does it impact that person? Did this case open because of abuse? Or are there services in the that we can put in the home to minimize through, for example, having the results of the Families First Act that we believe are coming? Is the parent aware of how their use impacts their kids? Is the parent, does the parent have significant criminal history? Is the parent being honest? Did the parents have a lapse? If they had a lapse, we know that's part of recovery. Were they honest about it, or did they hide it? Did they lie about it? Are they engaging in sober behaviors, or are they engaging in using behaviors? And I think when we look at that, we look at the community around them, their family members who could be in the home, people in the home who are dangerous. What does that look like? People in the home who are safe, who can be that safety net. You know, looking at the history of, or the home environment. Can a neighbor drop by? Is the caseworker, we have actually, at the department, they have a special team that is assigned to families where it is a real effort to keep the kids in the home. And those caseworkers go out, I think, multiple times a week to check on the children to make sure they're okay. And I think that looking at the whole of the parent and what the parent can do, even if they are using, but how they can understand their use and work toward being honest and keeping their kids in the home with supports. I think openness for supports is also really helps with balancing too.
Thank you, Wendy. Turning to the audience again, we're curious, what innovative treatment approaches are you using in your own jurisdictions and communities to help keep families together, either on the delinquency side or dependency side? We're interested in hearing what you might be doing in that realm. So again, Mark and Adria will watch the chat here.
I will note that Peggy Van Sickle mentioned that their juvenile court uses court-appointed special advocates for children that assist in monitoring the rights of children while treatment needs are addressed. So we're big proponents of CASA. Thank you, Peggy. And Kimberly Grimes mentioned that the stigma with treatment providers, treatment court staff, and child welfare was huge. Overcoming that, providing small group trainings with panels on MAT providers and for family treatment court, that it was an intentional year-long process to provide trainings to overcome some of the resistance and some of the stigma. So we appreciate that from Kimberly Grimes in Sacramento County. And also, just as a note here, Adria mentioned that you can email her for certificates. So while we're waiting on anyone else to, and then Sherry Hall has put in a link to a medical and legal partnership if anybody's interested in clicking on that to utilize that resource.
Thank you. Yeah, if anybody needs a certificate of attendance for today's webinar, that you can email Adria for. Her email should be there in the chat box. We're going to go ahead and spend the last 5 minutes or so wrapping up today's webinar. I thought I would share some final, we'll have our panelists share some final thoughts here in just a moment. We have some resources that will be dropped into the chat, as well as files to be shared in the chat. So the first two are NCJFCJ's policy statement and infographic. So we have a position statement on using MAT from the court's perspective, and a companion infographic to go along with those. Those should both be in the chat as a file that you could download yourself. And then we will also share the link from SAMHSA on medication-assisted treatment, their webpage dedicated to the topic. And then, as we mentioned, Family First and its components that are coming to fruition shortly. This specific link here that'll end up in the chat is to the clearinghouse of evidence-based resources that you can use and can receive funding for when you do use them in your jurisdiction after your Family First Plan has been submitted and adopted. And so if there's any, Mark, if you'll check if there's anything in the chat that we need to address. Otherwise, I'll go to Judge Delgado as for a final thought, and then we'll go to the rest of the team for final thoughts as well.
Okay, no, nothing so far.
Okay. Judge, if you would go ahead and maybe for a minute or so that, final
Sure.
thoughts on today's topic.
Well, I was thinking about this question yesterday when I met with Catherine and Wendy in preparation for today's meeting, and it made me think back to the transformation I have had as a judge from 2002 when I was appointed to where I'm at today in 2021. And the incredible privilege that I have had to serve as a juvenile judge. When I walked into the juvenile court in 2006, my very first day was a termination hearing. It was a horrible case. I demonized the parents, didn't understand how they could possibly do this to their children. Why couldn't they follow a treatment plan? How could they just give in to their substance abuse and not work to regain custody of their children? That's not who I am today. And I am so grateful that I'm not that judge today. I am a judge now that understands the issues. I am a judge that has compassion for the people that come into my courtroom, and a judge that understands that these people do not want to be in my courtroom. They would rather just be normal people. And what do I mean by normal? Not have a substance abuse disorder, not have children that are in foster care or living with other family. They want to be just regular citizens. And it is my job, and it is a privilege for me to help them get back to where they want to be. So I just, encourage everyone who's on this webinar to, look at your implicit bias about the people that are coming into your courtroom and recognize that these people have a lot of trauma, a lot of things that have shaped them into the people that are coming into your courtroom. They all want to get better. Give them the respect and provide them with the resources and the treatment that they need.
Thank you. Wendy or Catherine, maybe 30 seconds or so as a wrap up.
Sure. I want to say thank you for attending. It's been a privilege to speak with you all today. I would also like to tell you, obviously, I think it's pretty obvious. I'm pretty passionate about what I do, and I really, really value my clients. I do have 2 kids, and I find great pleasure in reminding them that I will not work for people who can pay for me. I will only work and represent people who are unable to pay for a lawyer of their own choosing. Because I think so for those lawyers out there, it is our job as individual attorneys, but using the resources we have through these types of organizations to, maintain the legal and the constitutional promise of effective legal counsel for all people. So I wish you all luck in representing people with a little more mountains to climb than some of us. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. Catherine?
And, I just wanted to say really where I started out that, I just think it's so important to form the relationships and to be willing to collaborate with the other stakeholders. When I tell people what I do, I always want to clarify to them that I am not a prosecutor, that I represent the department and I have the same goal as the other side of the room, because I really do. I really want to, we want to see that reunification and those successful cases. Those are what we're all working towards. That's what social workers want to see happen. So I just think it's really helpful and important to really form those relationships. Consider starting a treatment court, get to know your providers, make sure that your judge is involved with their department and understands what's available, because it makes all the difference for the families. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And as we wrap up, we're going to toss a link for an evaluation for today's webinar in the chat. So if you have a moment right after the webinar to fill out the evaluation. We also are doing another webinar in February. You can register for that one as well. I believe we'll toss that link in the chat box as well, or you can go to ncjfcj.org to register for the next one in February, which is going to address difficult conversations around harm reduction. And lastly, thank you all for attending, and most importantly, thank you for the work that you do on behalf of children and families in your own jurisdictions. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.